Hello and welcome to Writing America, Pages and People. If you're here to learn about an American author and some of their works, then you're in the right place. My name is Rachel Rigolino and I'm an instructor in the English department at the State University of New York at New Paltz. So come on, we'll watch this video and leave some comments below. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper is one of the most important African American writers, really, before the 20th century. She wrote poetry, fiction, essays, lectures, and speeches as well. She was born in 1825 in Baltimore, and sadly, her mother died when she was only 3, and she was raised by an aunt and uncle. Her uncle ran the Academy for Negro Youth, and Harper studied there until she was 13. She later worked for a Quaker family where she had access to books and a wide range of literature. So she was very, very well read. She went on to become, as I said, a poet. Primarily, that's what we remember her for, but she also wrote some fiction. And of course, she published essays and she gave many speeches. She was a speaker on the abolitionist circuit. She helped enslaved people escape through the Underground Railroad. She wrote many times for anti-slavery newspapers and earned a really strong reputation as an important early figure in African American journalism. Now, here is something that is really remarkable about her. In 1859, her short story, The Two Offers, appeared in the Anglo-African American magazine, a black-edited abolitionist magazine founded by Thomas Hamilton. And her story has been recognized as the first short story published by an African American woman. That publication context matters. The Anglo-African magazine created a space for black writers to represent themselves as thinkers and artists and political actors at a time, of course, when racist institutions worked to deny black intellectual life. And, Thomas Hamilton's magazine explicitly invited contributions from men and women of color. And so it makes the magazine itself just part of this rich history of black literary self-representation. Now, before I go on to discuss The Two Offers, I want to make this point that Harper is really best known for her poetry. And her poetry really still has the power to move. In poems like The Slave Mother, The Slave Auction, Bury Me in a Free Land, Songs for My People, Harper is using verse as protest, and her poems really helped establish the tradition of African American protest poetry. In the poem Bury Me in a Free Land, Harper imagines death itself as intolerable if the speaker must be buried in a land where slavery still exists. Now, let's take a listen of this wonderful reading of the poem by Tim Graysick.
Bury Me in a Free Land by Frances E.W. Harper. Make me a grave where'er you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where men are slaves. I could not rest if around my grave I heard the steps of a trembling slave. His shadow above my silent tomb would make it a place of fearful gloom. I could not rest if I heard the tread of a coffle gang to the shambles led, and the mother's shriek of wild despair rise like a curse on the trembling air. I could not sleep if I saw the lash drinking her blood at each fearful gash, and I saw her babes torn from her breast like trembling doves torn from their parent nest. I'd shudder and start if I heard the bay of bloodhounds seizing their human prey, and I heard the captive plead in vain as they bound afresh his galling chain. If I saw young girls from their mother's arms bartered and sold for their youthful charms, my eye would flash with a mournful flame, my death-paled cheek grow red with shame. I would sleep, dear friends, where bloated might can rob no man of his dearest right. My rest shall be calm in any grave, where none can call his brother a slave. I ask no monument proud and high to arrest the gaze of the passers-by. All that my yearning spirit craves is bury me not in a land of slaves.
Another of Harper's most moving poems is The Slave Mother, published in 1854. The poem imagines the anguish of an enslaved mother whose child is sold away from her. Harper asks readers to recognize what slavery destroys, not only freedom, but family, motherhood, love, and human dignity. And here is just a wonderful reading by Felicia Rashad. Let's take a listen.
Heard you that shriek? It rose so wildly in the air, it seemed as if a burdened heart was breaking in despair. Saw you those hands so sadly clasped, the bowed and feeble head, the shuddering of that fragile form, that look of grief and dread? Saw you the sad, imploring eye? Its every glance was pain, as if a storm of agony were sweeping through the brain. She is a mother, pale with fear. Her boy clings to her side, and in her kirtle vainly tries his trembling form to hide. He is not hers, although she bore for him a mother's pains. He is not hers, although her blood is coursing through his veins. He is not hers, for cruel hands may rudely tear apart the only wreath of household love that binds her breaking heart. His love has been a joyous light that o'er her pathway smiled, a fountain gushing ever new amid life's desert wild. His lightest word has been a tone of music round her heart. Their lives a streamlet blent in one. Oh, Father, must they part? They tear him from her circling arms, her last and fond embrace. Oh, nevermore may her sad eyes gaze on his mournful face. No marvel, then, these bitter shrieks disturb the listening air. She is a mother, and her heart is breaking in despair.
Now let's return to Harper's short story, The Two Offers. This story on the surface seems kind of strange because here we have this really famous anti-slavery poet, and we see this story, we open up, we start reading, and we find that it is a story focused on the lives of two women debating marriage. Now, let's take a look at the story, a quick summary. So they're two cousins, right? Laura LaGrange and Jeanette Alston. So Laura is considering two offers of marriage, and keep in mind that in the 19th century, that would have been one of the few major choices many women were allowed to make, whom to marry and sometimes whether to marry. So Jeanette warns Laura not to treat marriage as some kind of bargain or just getting married for convenience. But Laura winds up marrying a vain and unreliable man. She suffers grief and abandonment and eventually dies, kind of in keeping with sentimental literature. Jeanette, on the other hand, remains unmarried and becomes a writer and a reformer. Now, for a long time, some scholars just assumed that Laura and Jeanette were white women. And that is pretty interesting, but maybe in keeping with the scholars who were researching Harper. But later critics have challenged that assumption, and Kathy Glass notes in her chapter that scholars such as Hazel Carby, Carla Peterson, and others have emphasized the story's racial ambiguity because Harper does not describe the women. So we're left to fill in the blanks, much as in a story such as Toni Morrison's Recitative, right? So again, we need to keep in mind the publication. This was published in the Anglo-African magazine, which I discussed before. It is a place that magazine created a space for Black writers, right, to represent themselves as thinkers, artists, and political activists. So we need to keep in mind that this magazine is for a Black readership and not just a white readership. So I think that is important. Now, the ending of the two authors is crucial. After Laura's death, Jeanette does not retreat into bitterness or some type of private sorrow. Instead, Jeanette turns outward. She commits herself to helping the poor, the suffering, but especially the fugitive slave. In other words, Jeanette's grief becomes moral action. Okay, so Harper ends this story by moving from the private world of marriage and domestic, disappointment into the public world of abolition and reform. And that ending helps us understand the story's larger purpose. Harper is not simply warning women against bad marriages and marrying the wrong guy. Of course, she's doing that. But she's also asking readers to think about freedom more broadly. Freedom as conceptualized as a part of human freedom. So the story begins with 2 marriage proposals, but it really ends with a call to social conscience. So think about that when you get to the ending. Now, and that is why Harper still speaks to the present. In Courtney L. Thompson's article, If There Is Common Rough Work to Be Done, Call on Me, tracing the legacy of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper in the Black Lives Matter era, Thompson argues that Harper's, quote, common rough work connects to the ongoing labor of Black women activists who defend Black life, expose injustice, and demand a more honest democracy. I think we can say that Harper's writing asks a question that's still important. And that question is, what does freedom mean if it's not shared? Now, for Harper, freedom cannot belong only to the privileged, the male, the white, the wealthy. Freedom is real only when it reaches those whose humanity has been denied. And her Christian faith helped propel this commitment. Like many 19th century reformers, Harper saw service to others as, I would say, both a moral and a spiritual obligation, not simply a political position. In her poems, fiction, speeches, she insists that faith must be lived through action, seeing suffering clearly, speaking against injustice, and working on behalf of others. So I would say in sum that for Harper, writing was one form of service, a way to witness suffering and call her readers to action.